Thanks. Masayoshi-san reportedly proposing a joint U.S.-Japan sovereign wealth fund to invest in tech, discussing the idea directly with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, according to the Financial Times. Our Deirdre Bosa has more on the rise of sovereign AI for today's Tech Check. Deirdre, how would all this work?
So let me tell you. So first of all, if this is true, though, we have to note that Masayoshi-san, he would be at the center of another big AI gamble. Now, a source familiar with those talks tells me that the story is overblown. But even if the fund doesn't materialize as reported, the idea speaks to a real shift that is underway. So instead of offering tax breaks and waiting for companies to build, this could be a blueprint for governments to take direct stakes in their AI futures, funding data centers, securing chips, compute capacity, exactly the kind of projects that NVIDIA sits at the center of. It also fits into this larger trend that is very much underway, and that is the rise of sovereign AI. From Saudi Arabia to the UAE, nations, they are racing to lock in access to American GPUs. In fact, this is Milius's AI chart of the week. Recent sovereign-led AI infrastructure announcements measured in gigawatts of AI compute. Now, together, they represent more than $500 billion in total addressable market, much of that going to NVIDIA, which Milius says proves that sovereign AI has risen from the ashes of the Biden AI diffusion rule. That's a policy that was aimed at slowing the global spread of advanced chips. Now, under Trump, that caution has turned to acceleration. Countries are now racing to scale up and buy in. Now, Jensen Huang in January, he compared sovereign AI to every country having their own telco. He said AI is going to be part of a national infrastructure the way that telco is part of national infrastructure, he told analysts. This policy, though, it does come with risk. We've talked about this before. NVIDIA's customer base, it's shifting from big tech to nation states. So bigger orders, but also pulling NVIDIA deeper into geopolitics. And we know how that has worked out in China. It could either be a massive tailwind and suddenly a massive liability. Now, under Trump, a containment strategy that's being replaced, as far as we can see now, by country deals that tie chip access to broader trade agreements. And that could open up new markets, but it also means that NVIDIA's revenue is increasingly dependent on political alignment. So, guys, the question going into earnings is, can NVIDIA keep growing if policy, not just demand, that is a key shift, if that decides where its chips are going to go?
I wonder how big of a threat this is going to be tomorrow night when we get earnings, Dee.
Yeah, I mean, Jensen Huang has talked a lot about this idea of sovereign AI. But remember, when that diffusion rule was first sort of scrapped by the Trump administration, a lot of Wall Street saw that as a bearish signal, right? Because it's a more complicated way of dishing out chips around the world. They don't just automatically go to our friends and allies anymore. You got to negotiate one by one. And so far, you know, with Saudi Arabia and UAE, that looks positive, especially because they have so much money to spend. But is that trend going to continue to be the case? That's a key question.
But back to the sovereign wealth fund. How does that work? Because the U.S. at this point, I mean, we have all these great technology companies with orders coming from around the world. But how does the U.S. share in that fortune?
It's a pretty unusual strategy, but the idea, at least on the Japan side, would sort of calm some of those political tensions and have a way for them to buy in American technology. You're exactly right, Sarah. That's what everyone wants access to. A source tells me that this is overblown, that it's not really happening, but the idea of it really represents how eager countries like Japan are to get their hands on that technology. The FT reported that it could be massive, as much as $300 billion, and eventually you can let other LPs get into that and sort of split the profits and the returns between Japan and the U.S. But, you know, it is a really complicated, unprecedented idea that also kind of defeats the idea of a sovereign wealth fund if you're going to split it between two nations.
But is anyone better positioned to advocate for it in Japan other than Masa-san?
Great point. And it's only an idea that could come from Masayoshi-san, right? Something as ambitious and unusual as this.
Yep, he was there with President Trump very early on, announcing
one of the first,
doubling his last investment in the last administration. Thank you, Deirdre.